Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shauna Kay and I am the Alternative Woman. Talk about taboo topics for women that are like me, maybe business owners, work in the corporate field, suburban mom, kids, family, bachelor's degree, whatever it is that we find very normal and expected in today's society from women. I like to break those down and expose the taboo things like LSD, marijuana, microdosing, shrooms. You know, it's not always a glass of wine and posh living. There are some popcorn popping in the background in some of our homes, as well as other things popping in the background. I'm gonna finish up the popcorn and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna talk to you about risks of Kratom and what to look out for. Kratom, what it is, and the risks that you need to be thinking about before or during your consumption. Now, Kratom is a tropical tree in the Pacific Asia area, Indonesia, Thailand, and it has been used for centuries for medicinal purposes. It acts on your receptors. It's very similar to painkillers. That's why it kind of gets a bad rep. That's why that's the taboo type of discussion that I'm talking about here, because it's a no-no to many people that just base their opinion and thought on the media or the FDA. Just blanket statement, they want to take it as fact instead of actually digging deeper into what more is there. You know, is there more to the story than just meets the eye? This tree has been used for centuries for medicinal purposes. Now, yeah, sure, it could have some bad sides to it, some warnings, and that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about in this video. But one disclosure to keep in mind while I list to you some warnings. Alcohol and cigarettes are freely beloved in this nation as well as many other nations. And it actually does cause death, and millions of deaths every year, even daily. So remember that while I talk about Kratom and the risks that you should definitely take serious before you consume something that's this alternative in nature. Anything can be abused. Anything can become an addiction. And sure, some things more than others, and I'll go into that and why I think that is. But everything in moderation is key. A glass of wine every now and then is harmless, but then you do have alcoholics. But not every person who enjoys a glass of wine is an alcoholic. So there's always those two sides of the coin. Very first risk to keep in mind regarding Kratom is the addictive side to it. Because it acts on the same receptors that narcotics do, it gives you that feel-good, happy mentality, and it's so sad that that is frowned upon. That feeling that a person gets and wanting that feeling makes you like a bad person in today's society, which is so heartbreaking when you stop and think about it. But yes, that feeling you get when you take a Percocet or a Vicodin is very similar to the feelings that you get when you consume Kratom, because of how it acts on the dopamine and the receptors in your mind and nervous system that sends those feel-good signals up. I'm not going to go into the scientific reasons here, the biological details, but because that is the case, and that is literally one of the most popular risks people give, it's a huge possibility that it will cause a dependency on it, an addiction. You'll want more of it because you want that feel-good mindset. Who doesn't? That's my first point. Second point is it's because it makes you feel better. Now, that's a natural desire we humans get. Put anything in its place. Put coffee. That feeling you get when you drink a coffee first thing in the morning, you want to chase after that feeling, right? And then you form a dependency on your morning cup of coffee, and then it becomes 2 or maybe 3 by the time it's noon. That is exactly the same risk as you would consuming Kratom. Sugar is actually more addicting then Kratom, by far. The studies are there. I'll link it down in the description notes. So that is the #1 risk to keep in mind. If you tend to have an addictive personality, you tend to latch onto things that make you feel good, like sex, love, relationships, sugar, cookies, fill in the blank. This might not be the best thing for you because it will definitely act on those things that puts you in a good mood. And if you're one that's seeking after that constantly, perhaps in an unhealthy manner, because you've not learned coping skills, you've not learned how to balance your emotions out with some great therapy, which I think we all need, this might not be the best thing for you. And that is the #1 risk to keep in mind when consuming Kratom, is the high probability you might be dependent on it, especially if you dabble with extracts. I highly am against that. I think only people with actual medical issues should even be able to access extracts. Shoot me down if you will, but I'm a huge supporter of regulating those, especially extracts, because people do tend to just get dependent on it. Keep that in mind. Avoid extracts, but definitely be careful trying Kratom if that is something that you're prone to, because it's a high risk of dependency. Now, not so much the powder. I'll use that stipulation here. If you stick to powder, you're less likely to become addicted and get addicted and want more of Kratom versus if you were to take the extracts, because it's more potent. It's like taking a shot of vodka versus a small pint of beer. It's exactly how I see Kratom powder and extract. So when you're first starting out, I highly recommend you stick with powder. Unless you really have a medical issue with chronic pain or really bad anxiety, then you can reserve some extracts for those really bad days. The second common issue and risk of consuming Kratom is constipation, especially if you take the powder. You consume powder, whether it be in tea form, is probably the best to avoid this risk, but definitely if you toss and wash, you will start to shit balls of green sand. I've seen it. Occasionally it happens to me, and that is purely because I'm not taking enough fiber. If you're prone to constipation in general, this is something that would definitely make it worse. High probability. Now, if you have Crohn's disease or something that kind of is the opposite of being constipated all the time, Kratom has been known to do wonders for people with that kind of medical condition because it helps to harden your shits and kind of fix that problem and regulate things in your system. Now, of course, always seek a medical professional before you try anything. Got to be careful though with your opinion and their opinion on Kratom, because many doctors just want to believe the first thing that rolls off the FDA's tongue and, you know, pharmacies' tongues. I will always reference back to Dr. Ross and her amazing book supporting Kratom, and there's many other doctors that have done their homework and they know exactly what Kratom is and how it can help you along with the possible risks. And the third risk is a possibility that you might throw up. That is usually a telltale sign that you consume too much. Technically, what I say in all my other videos when I talk about Kratom and the bad side to it is that's how you know you took too much, is when you start to throw up and get the wobbles. You start to get the spins, like you drank a shit ton and mixed it with some beer and liquor, and you know that it's gonna make you sicker. And you'll get those spins and you'll wanna throw up. And that's the worst of it. Once you're done throwing up, you're good. You feel great. Sometimes the benefits of Kratom are still going strong, but you feel better because you threw it out of your system. Most likely because you consume too much. That is usually the telltale sign based on the research that is out there. Vomiting is not a life or death situation, most cases, but it is a risk that is highly possible and common for many people that do consume too much in one single dose. Fourth risk, that's very uncommon. The more I add the risks, the less common they become. Kidney issues. Now, just like if you take too much ibuprofen, too much painkillers, it starts to wear on your kidneys and you'll start to get issues with your kidneys. There's medical terminology that's used for these kind of issues. Now, you want to avoid these by not consuming too much. This is also a sign that you've become addicted to something, which is the #1 risk here. This is the result of that. So be very careful with your consumption, because if you are prone to kidney issues, you're even more prone to this happening with the consumption of kratom. So of course, know your body. That's the very important thing. And use caution and discretion. Keep to a good dose so you make sure you're not going over and too often. Keep yourself accountable, and this will help you avoid this being a possible issue for you. A 5th risk that I've heard of, it's not very common, but it's hair loss. A couple here or there on Reddit have reported this being an issue. I think this is similar to taking too much. So again, with the kidneys, it can affect your hair loss. So this risk is more likely due to the overconsumption of kratom, but it is something that has been reported to happen. More reason for more research to be done so we can confirm these and put a plan in place to make sure that if this really is a concerning risk, that we try to avoid whatever might be causing this when you consume kratom. It's not very common, but I have heard it around, so it is definitely a risk to be aware of. 6th one really isn't a risk, but it's something that is something to note, is when the effects start to wear off. That you feel nothing, which is not always a good thing. If you're consuming kratom and it always worked, and all of a sudden it stops working, there are different factors as to why. It's not really something to be concerned about unless it's because you were taking too much. Effects will not be as strong. You'll have to take more of something to get the benefit. Your body, when it becomes dependent on something, will need it more of it to work. So things to do in that case is taper back, use stem and vein. Stem and vein has been helpful to combat when kratom isn't really being effective. Adding potentiators into the mix, citrus, like lemonade, pomegranate, dill juice, dill pickle juice. These are things that have been known to help increase the benefits of kratom if your body is not reacting as it once did. But before you use potentiators, I would highly recommend you do stem and vein, taper a little bit to get you back on track. That's because you have a tolerance increase to kratom. And if it's because, you know, medications can sometimes hinder the benefits of kratom, a lot of times SSRIs will lessen the benefits of kratom and you won't feel it as strongly because of something else being in your system. If that's the case, then you have to choose what's really more important, or include a potentiator into the mix and see if it will help combat the kind of altering effects that's happening because of something else in your system. That is typically the common reason something doesn't work, kratom doesn't work, but also because you have had increased tolerance to kratom. The next thing is dehydration. You are prone to get dehydrated quickly. That's why a lot of people recommend drinking a lot of liquid, water, when you dose with kratom, because you will dehydrate quicker. And that kind of connects with constipation being a side effect as well. So definitely keep that in mind when you're consuming kratom to increase your fluids. Make sure you always drink a full 8 ounces of water when you dose, and that can kind of help relieve that risk to consuming kratom. Figured I'd switch it up a bit and change location, so kids frolicking in the background won't be annoying. Okay, the next possible risk that you might experience with kratom that I've heard is runny nose and cold-like symptoms. Now, again, that is connected with taking too much kratom, kind of like how it throws your kidneys off with the other risk. This is because of consuming too much. This happens with things that are in the same kind of family, like kratom. So coffee is in the same family. If you become dependent on caffeine, the coffee, typically, you start to get those cold-like symptoms of runny nose, you know, itchy. Obviously that's from the drainage, so you cough. Same with when you consume too much Vicodin and you become dependent on painkillers. Your body will start to produce these cold-like symptoms, like if you have a cold or a flu minus the fever, because your body is being dependent on it. And these are just signs that your body shows you to show that. The next risk is irritability and anxiety. I'm going to combine these. Irritability, anxiety, and kind of depression. These are three things that I'm going to combine into one risk that I have heard many people deal with when they consume Kratom. Again, there's twofold to this one. One reason that seems to be the case is they start to get irritable and angry and moody with mood swings because, you guessed it, they take too much Kratom. But on the flip side to that, their body just reacts differently. So there's some people that just shouldn't take Kratom because they respond abnormal to it. Even though this Kratom tea, helps with irritability and it helps with moods, for the very rare few, it will do the opposite. That's very common, right? There's so many things that we have been known to take something that's known to do one thing and it actually does the opposite for us. Kratom is no exception to that rule. It's a possibility, it's a possible risk, something you should be definitely aware of, that your body might react differently than the common person, the average person consuming Kratom. The last and final risk, of course, keep in mind that all of our bodies are different. We can all have some weird shit happen when we take something, and us be that one-off rare case. So this by no means is the only list of risks, but I will close it off with death. Death being a possible risk, you know, just like you go get in the car and you drive to work. You're taking a risk that some dumbass ain't gonna come T-bone you and kill you. This is something that's always a possibility for all of us. We will not be spared death. So I'm including this purely because of the fine print that the media and the FDA like to avoid. Yes, you can have that possible risk with Kratom, but it is because of a rare medical condition or because you mixed Kratom with a hard drug or some other medication that you shouldn't have, or that was, again, a rare medical situation. Not a single death from a person who consumed Kratom and Kratom was in their system at cause of death was Kratom alone. Not a single case has that been the issue. People like to avoid admitting that. The media will always highlight something that's, you know, rare to hear. You know, when you hear a person died from an overdose, okay, you know, that's a dime a dozen, right? But someone died, but they had something in their system called Kratom? Oh, he died of Kratom. Do you see what I mean? People like to latch on to something that's different, trendy, something that will get them on the top of the Google search, something that people have not heard before, and it'll perk their interest. Trust me, I know. I'm a marketer. I own a business for marketing. This is just a trade book secret. That's just not really a secret. It's just typical. You latch onto something that's different, unique, maybe has a spin to it because if we heard of this Kratom thing in another news. Didn't they march at some DC march? So this Kratom thing, oh, there must be more to it. So typical. And not a single one of those deaths were from Kratom alone. People always had something else in their system, whether it be meth, narcotics, fentanyl, you name it. It was not because of Kratom by itself. But it is something I'll still add to the list because you never know. Some people might have a severe sensitivity or allergic reaction to Kratom because every body is different. We are all unique. So all of these risks is a high possibility, high probability that one of them will hit you. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Comment below, let me know what kind of symptoms or risks you have experienced. I know I've experienced plenty, especially the constipation one and shit and sandy bricks. Guilty! I just realized I just had to increase my fiber and boom, that was fixed. So again, these things are possible. We are not an exception to the rule. And always remember, everything in moderation. Anything can become an addiction. Anybody can abuse anything under the sun. J-Lo used to be obsessed with the relationships. I have a friend who just has to have 5 cups of coffee before noon. I used to be obsessed and addicted to Monster energy drinks. There's plenty of people that love cookies and sugar, and white sugar, it's an intense addiction. And all of that to say, when you go to stop Kratom, you get withdrawals, right? So watch out for my next video where I will go into details about withdrawal symptoms. It's different than risks. So I'm going to make a whole new video dedicated to the withdrawal symptoms. But just for a common thing that I need people to hear, if you've ever withdrawn or detoxed from white sugar, those withdrawal symptoms are 100% worse than any withdrawal symptom I'm going to be talking about in my next video. Just a heads up. I want to close on that note, that white sugar causes you more severe withdrawals than Kratom will. But come back for my next video so you can hear all the details as to why that is and more. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, share, breaking these taboos down one by one. Have a great rest of your day.